Humans can be incredibly creative, cooperative, ingenious. We can do so many beautiful things. The list is endless. It really, really is. And then on the other hand, we have this absolutely barbaric, darker side. This video is about that darker side and the archaeological evidence we have for it in Europe. We're going to go from the Paleolithic right down to the Iron Age and everywhere in between. Hopefully I've picked some interesting examples that show that morbidness that we have, but also illuminate something else about the time period. YouTube moderators, this video is not intended to shock. It's about a fundamental aspect of human evolution and society. It's all based on academic research. There's going to be no crazy footage or anything like that, just things taken from archaeological excavations. So please do not nuke my channel as a result of this video. And yeah, hopefully it will provide some inspiration, at least for some death metal album titles. 1.8 million years ago, the green valleys of what is now Georgia were home to these extremely ancient humans. I called them humans, but that is kind of debatable. Me personally, I would think of them as humans, but their classification is still not really secure. You can think of them as kind of early Homo erectus. Although they stood about 5 foot tall, their brains were half the size of ours, and they made very, very simple tools. Just simple flakes and choppers. I forgot to bring one. I totally forgot to bring one. Kind of like older one style tools, basically. Very simple. However, they must have had a certain drive and curiosity. They almost certainly represent the kind of hominin that was the first to expand out of Africa and really push the boundaries of humanity. Adapting to new climates, trying to find new food sources. It's our earliest sign of our sort of adaptability that will, of course, allow us to take over the whole world. And lots of negative stuff came with that as well. But it's that first sort of sign that we can really adapt and change and move. Maybe this helped them, but one of the causes for this expansion might have been their ability to cooperate. One of the hominins, looking at the skull here from Dmanisi D3444, lived to an old enough age that all their teeth had fallen out and their gums had reabsorbed the sockets. They lived without teeth for quite a long time. It could be done on your own, of course, but probably it's a sign that they had some sort of supportive community around them, at least a little bit. There's really so much we don't know about Homo erectus, particularly early Homo erectus, though. Did they have any form of language? We don't know. How large were their societies and the communities that they lived in? We don't know. What did they make out of wood that hasn't survived archaeologically? Did they have any form of rudimentary clothing? The list of unknowns just goes on and on and on. But we do know one thing. This one, D2280, came to a rather sticky end. There are 4 big depressions across this ancient cranium. Although these can be caused like various factors like cancer and disease. The authors behind this paper believe blunt force trauma is the best explanation for 3 of them at least, 3 of the 4. Whether these dents in the skull were caused by an accident or some sort of violent conflict over who knows what, resources, food, mates, control of their society, of course, we can never know. It does seem that these were not fatal, though. It seems like they healed. So D2280 survived for a little bit after these blows. Can't have been pleasant, though. Can't have been nice. Poor D2280. But sadly for them, it doesn't end there. On the underside of the cranium, there are these 2 large perforations that happened around the time of death. What caused these? Well, the gaps between the holes are a match for the jaws of hyena and big cats that we know for sure were living in and around Dmanisi. There's lots of evidence for them at the Dmanisi site. And that sort of puncture at the back of the skull is quite common if one of them grabs you by the head, apparently, according to the authors. And D2280 is also the only hominin, it seems, from Dmanisi missing its jaw. Could be coincidence, but apparently losing your jaw is a common side effect of having your face eaten. Wouldn't know personally, but apparently that is the case. So yeah, an interesting specimen, Dmanisi D2280. They're on the cusp of that maybe that first human revolution, whatever was going on in their brain that allowed them to expand into new areas and explore the world. But it wasn't enough to stop you from becoming mere hyena food. It still went down like that back then. The only thing worse than having your face eaten by a hyena is your personal information being bought and traded online. Pretty sure that's equally as bad. That is exactly what's happening, but Delete Me is here to help. Your personal information is on all these lists, flying around the internet, being traded, and it's a cause of spam, harassment, all the bad stuff we see online. They think they had it tough in prehistory. Try living in our time. You have the right to have all your information removed from these lists, but no one has the time to do that, right? Delete Me will do it for you. They'll file on your behalf to get your information off these lists. They can even do it for your family members too. They'll send you a report every month showing you what's been removed, how much, all this stuff. It's great. If you care about your privacy, I think it's a great thing to try out. You can get 20% off consumer plans where you go to joindeleteme.com/Stefan Milo. There's a link below. Give it a try. Thank you so much to Delete Me for once again supporting this channel. Let's get back to the lovely events of prehistory. Moving much further west and much more closer to our time, Goyet Cave in Belgium. Between 40 and 45,000 years ago, this cave was home to some of the last Neanderthals to really ever walk the earth. It's right at the end of the Neanderthal time period. By this time, modern humans, anatomically modern humans, had spread everywhere in the world with the probable exception of America. Or if they were in the Americas, maybe just in the far, far north, Beringia, that sort of region perhaps, but they'd spread across the whole world basically, and we had absorbed and replaced any other human groups like Neanderthals that we came across. Not many Neanderthals left at this time period. Now, of course, the Neanderthals in Goyet Cave certainly had no concept that they were the last of their kind. How could they even know that? But who knows what they thought of these new people that were arriving in Europe at that time? Did they feel like their lifestyle was changing a lot? It's interesting to ponder, Who knows? Who knows, right? But like the hyenas of ancient Dmanisi, it seems these Neanderthals were a bit partial to man flesh. Man flesh. In a study of 99 Neanderthal remains found in the cave, almost 1/3 showed signs of being butchered. Things like cut marks on the bones, long bones snapped to extract marrow. These Neanderthals were probably lunch for someone. But that's not even the worst of it to me. To my mind, it only gets a little bit more metal from here, because in the Paleolithic world, right, there are no shops at all. Literally everything you need to survive, every possession you have to create yourself. That's the environment that these people are living in. No doubt, I'm sure that creates a bit of a sense of waste not, want not, and this attitude was seemingly applied to the Neanderthals who were eaten. 4 of the long bones have what archaeologists call retouching marks. Basically, it's used to re-sharpen or sharpen the blade, a flint blade, after it's been used. Something like that. I don't know why, but that seems so much worse than being eaten in a way. It seems so utilitarian. With my modern sensibilities, I don't like to view the human body in that way. I'm a little bit sensitive. But to a Neanderthal, who must simply produce everything they need to survive, and there's literally no one is going to give them anything. No food, no tools, no nothing. You could be lunch. You really could be lunch to a Neanderthal. And after they're done with you, they might re-sharpen their blades on what's left of your bones. It's kind of crazy. Don't go back in time, guys. Don't go back in time to the Paleolithic. So far, both examples we've discussed have a kind of practicality to them. It seems like this is just the ebb and flow of the natural world, kill or be killed. But humans, we kind of have this extra element to us, don't we? We have this creativity, this spirituality. We're kind of funky in that regard. And sometimes that creativity, that spirituality, manifests itself violently as well. We're in southern Germany now at a site called Offnet Cave, and we've moved much further forward in time again, probably to around 9,000 years ago, something like that. A period European archaeologists call the Mesolithic. During the Mesolithic, people were still hunting and gathering, things like that, but the large beasts of the Ice Age were long dead. They hunted animals much more familiar to us, like boar and deer. In Denmark, actually, archaeologists even found this like a chewing gum, a chewy, made of birch pitch, and apart from the human DNA within it, they were able to sort of see this person's last meal. Seems they ate hazelnuts and ducks. It's so ridiculous how good technology is getting at peeling back the layers of the past. Like, you could be chewing a chewy, and you spit it on the floor, and then 5,000-6,000 years later, archaeologists are getting your DNA and seeing what you had for lunch. Mental. Bananas. Absolutely bananas. Mesolithic, it's a very cool time period archaeology. I absolutely love it. But for the inhabitants of Offnet Cave, it seems it was a violent time. In 1908, archaeologist Robert Rudolf Schmidt excavated 2 depressions that he found in the ground at Offnet. While he uncovered, probably a huge surprise, I'm sure he didn't expect this, the heads of 34 people, all orientated west towards the setting sun, all covered in red ochre and buried alongside 215 deer teeth and 4,250 shells. So much. It's incredible, but obviously extremely macabre sight. It's like, prehistoric headhunting is going on, something like that. Of the 34 skulls found, 6 of them seemingly had fatal wounds to the skull. So the others must have died in a way that didn't leave a mark on the skull. It is believed that they were deposited at the time of death, that this wasn't just a collection of bones that people had, because a lot of the neck vertebrae and things like that were still articulated. Gruesome, I know. Incredibly sadly, 17 of the cranium belonged to children that were 6 years old or under. What to even say about that? And based on the dates of the skull, archaeologists are not sure if this is one event or people were repeatedly coming back and depositing skulls here. Radiocarbon dating was in German. I couldn't get to grips with it, but there's basically not sure if this is one event, but it is evidence in this Mesolithic time, in this hunter-gathering time, of warlike behavior. Someone was collecting these skulls and putting them there, destined to watch the sunset for thousands upon thousands of years. 2 really incredible sites, also dating to the Mesolithic, Teviek and Hodijk Island. I'm 100% sure I've butchered that pronunciation. Apologies to the people of France. These islands are on the Atlantic coast of Brittany. Originally excavated in the 1920s and 30s, Marta and Saint-Just-Picard were digging under these enormous shell middens. A midden basically is a prehistoric dump. It's where people in a community would just dump all their waste. In this case, it consists of hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of shells, mollusk shells, things like that these people are eating and just throwing outside. The burials under these middens are some of the most elaborate burials I've ever seen from prehistoric Europe. I think it'll blow your mind. Look at this image here. This is one of the original photos. You can kind of make out that these people are buried under like a halo, a crown of these enormous antlers. Another burial of 2 women was the same. They're positioned in this grave under this roof of antlers. It's absolutely mind-blowing stuff. It's incredible stuff. It's the most incredible Mesolithic burial I've seen. Really bizarre. On an old French website, I wasn't able to verify this any other way, but on an early sort of tourism website describing this excavation, it described how one burial of a man was inside the ribcage of another man. Like they had stacked this body in the ribcage. What's going on there? What are the ancients up to? What are they up to, honestly? Your last burial place is inside the ribcage of another person. What are they meaning by that? I just don't know. I hate to laugh at such a macabre thing, but what were the ancestors doing? Certainly, there's some really complex spiritual beliefs underpinning this behavior. There's something going on there. And whatever the justification for their burial, it seems that some of them came to a sticky end. One of the women under that sort of roof of antlers that I showed you had various blows to the skull, including this pretty nasty wound above the right eye. There was another burial with a flint arrow still embedded in the spine. So not all of the people buried on these islands came to a nice end, that's for sure. The really interesting thing, though, about these burials isn't just how elaborate they are. It's also the timing of them. Some of them date to the very, very end of the Mesolithic, about 5,500 years ago. They were islands at this time. It seems they became islands maybe 6,000-ish years ago. So it's believed that these were islands. And 5,500 years ago, the Neolithic was already in full swing across Europe. And many French Neolithic monuments were constructed during this time or maybe even before this time. There's a lot of Neolithic monuments in Brittany. It really was a popular home for them. So was this Mesolithic community on these islands interacting with the Neolithic people in any way? Well, according to their DNA, it doesn't seem so. DNA analysis of the remains shows there's absolutely no evidence of Neolithic admixture in the ones that were sampled. So it really seems like on these islands there was this Mesolithic community holding out against the march of the Neolithic and these farming communities. You can't help but wonder, are these really elaborate burials connected to that in any way? I don't know. The Neolithic people living alongside these Mesolithic holdouts were farmers, as I said. Their lives depended on bountiful harvests of grain and their livestock and things like this. They built huge monuments to track the seasons, probably so their crops were planted at the right time. This agricultural economy allowed populations to expand and live a settled life, but it probably came with some drawbacks. The first being, you had to be in control of a piece of land for an entire year. You didn't want to go to all the effort of sowing the seeds and getting the fields ready and all of this to not be in control of the land when it's harvest time. As a result, this is no doubt the reason why we see an increase in warfare and things like that during the Neolithic. You have to control the land. And if you have in some way lost control of it, there's an enormous pressure to take resources, right? You've this large community to feed. You also cannot really afford a crop failure. That would be the ruin of your people. Starvation will follow unless you can somehow take someone else's food. So the success of crops was, of course, a major preoccupation for their spiritual beliefs, and they probably spared no expense in securing that spiritual benefit, that spiritual favor. In the Rhone Valley in southern France, amongst the vineyards and these beautiful villages, looks absolutely lovely, archaeologists uncovered the subtle remains of a Neolithic structure, a wooden structure. Inside it, there appeared to be a grain silo under the ground. This was a common way Neolithic people stored their grains. But instead of grain, they found the bodies of 3 women. One woman placed prominently in the center, the other 2 tucked away, hidden under the overhang, with broken grindstones placed next to them. The broken grindstones is very interesting. You sometimes see them in archaeological sites in the Neolithic time period. And maybe there was some sort of aspect of breaking it, sending it to another world, sending it to another god, something like that going on. But it's not just the broken grindstone that's kind of interesting. The position of one of these women was very odd too. She was seemingly placed with her face to the ground, which there's something about that which doesn't sit right with me. I don't know if any cultures do that, but at least from my culture, my worldview, my understanding, that seems like a very strange thing to do. That would seem like an almost insulting thing to do with my worldview. Who knows if they had the same one, but it is odd. There's something about it that seems odd to place someone face down in the ground. Her legs were also bent backwards towards her head. And so the authors of this paper hypothesize that this was some form of sacrifice. At least the 2 buried under the overhang, pinned down by these rocks in these strange positions. They call them deviant burials. And they hypothesize that her legs and neck were bound together and it caused her to strangulate herself. Crazy thing to happen. Now, one burial might not mean much on its own, but they went back through the literature, they went back through other excavation reports, they tried to see if they could find any other graves like this from this time period. They believe they have uncovered 20 other examples from Western Europe of this kind of burial. And so they're hypothesizing that what they've uncovered is a form of ritual sacrifice widespread across Neolithic Western Europe. It's not unreasonable. Human sacrifice is documented all over the world, especially amongst agricultural societies, I think. And it could be that these deviant burials are the subtle archaeological trace of that. Strangled for the barley god. Horrible. Off to the Bronze Age now. People are still farming, but they have metal. Life has moved on. The Neolithic population of Europe has largely been replaced by people with steppe ancestry. Britain was no exception to this. It seems like 90% of Britain's gene pool was replaced at this time. A huge population turnover. Very interesting archaeologically. The exact cause of this population change has been debated for a long time. Some wonder if this is the result of war. We see headlines like the Bronze Age people were the most, violent in history, things like that. I don't know that they're any more or less violent than the preceding Neolithic population, but they certainly produced a lot of axes. They can't have all been used for cutting down trees, let's put it that way. But another interesting factor in this transition may have been the plague. I've already made a whole video on this. I interviewed the geneticists behind the work. It's very interesting, very cool. It seems there was a widespread plague epidemic at around this Neolithic to Bronze Age transition. And I want to return to one of the sites I mentioned in that video, Charterhouse Warren, down in Britain. It's a cave, or maybe a better term is a shaft, where inside it archaeologists found the remains of 37 people. And we know from DNA that at least some of them had the plague, and probably many more of them because detecting plague is very difficult. But at least some of them for sure had the plague, had the Yersinia pestis. Now this new paper has come out, The Darker Angels of Our Nature, Early Bronze Age Butchered Human Remains from Charterhouse Warren, Somerset, UK, really analyzing the bones and what happened to these people. And you can see from the images here and the title of this paper that it didn't go well for them. There's a lot of cranial injuries, but also we can see evidence of defleshing. Many of the bones show cut marks, including odd places like the jaw, which you might not expect. It seems like there was not only an attempt to kill these people, but take them apart to hasten their transition into this next state, this other world, is how the author of the paper phrases it. And it cannot be ruled out, of course, that these people were eaten as a part of this display of violence. They might have eaten the plague victims. Why? Can you catch the plague doing that? Were they attacked because they had the plague? And this transformation of the bodies was in some way to... The mind boggles, man. The mind boggles. Eating plague victims is about as metal as it gets. That's about as hardcore as it gets. It doesn't get any much more hardcore than that. Final destination now, the Iron Age. By the 1st century, many areas of Europe had left prehistory now. We're at the very end of prehistory. People are doing terrible things like writing stuff down. And across many areas of Europe, a really strong warrior culture had taken hold. And this is connected to the Celts, but across other areas as well. There seems to be this really strong warrior culture. People are buried with weapons. There's artwork representing war. There's all sorts of stuff going on. One of the most fascinating artifacts from this time comes from Denmark. It's called the Gundestrup Cauldron. One of the panels off this cauldron shows people marching and riding off to war with their shields and spears and horses. It's absolutely beautiful, fantastic stuff. And on the left-hand side of this very same panel, a giant figure, presumably a king of some form or priest or someone important, seems to be sacrificing someone. It looks like they're placing someone head first into a cauldron. It was a terrible time, but still, this is an incredible representation of what they thought about the world, of their spiritual beliefs, and all of these things. And it's one that was no doubt based on reality. Just a little south to where this cauldron was unearthed, archaeologists have found the remains of an Iron Age battlefield near Alken Enga, dated sometime in the first half of the 1st century, between 2 BC, 54 AD, based on the radiocarbon dates of the remains. This was an interesting time for Europe. Rome had conquered Gaul. The Roman Empire actually expanded relatively close to where this battlefield was. No doubt the people of this community were aware of this huge empire to the south of them, but however much they were aware of it, they had their own battles to fight, and maybe this was influenced by Rome as well, who knows. But it seems along the edges of the Illarup River, at least 80, but perhaps as many as 300 people came to their end. All males, almost all of them adult males. This was a battlefield, no question. They're found alongside the remains of weapons and things like that. This was a place where hundreds of people came to a horrible end. What is especially creepy and interesting and metal and creepy again is that sometime after this battle, someone seemed to have returned to the site to rearrange the bodies. And I want you to look at this picture here. It might be hard to make out, but what you're looking at are the hip bones of 4 men threaded through a stick. This almost certainly had to have happened after all the flesh had decomposed, right? Just the bones were exposed. And someone erected this signpost of what had gone on here. Terrible stuff. Well, that's the end of our tour of violence in prehistory. There's so many examples of it. I could make this video 10 times over and each time have different examples. I'm sure in the comments now, if YouTube has allowed this video, you will have many other examples yourself. And yeah, not too long after this, writing became widespread. Prehistory came to an end and we never hurt each other ever again. Goodbye.